showing no link between vaccines and autism. This was something that multiple senators pressed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on, most notably Senator Bill Cassidy, who is a physician and is the chair of the Senate Health Committee, which hosted the second day's confirmation hearing. Here's an example of one exchange between those two on this topic.
If you are approved to this decision, to this position, will you say unequivocally, will you reassure mothers unequivocally and without qualification that the measles and hepatitis B vaccines do not cause autism?
Senator, I am not going into the agency with any.
Well, that's kind of a yes or no question, because because the data is there, and that's kind of a yes or no. And I don't mean to cut you off, but that really is a yes or no.
If the data is there, I will absolutely do that.
Now, there is the data, just because I used to do hepatitis B, as I've said. I know the data is there.
Well, then I will be the first person. If you show me data, I will be the first person to assure the American people that they need to take those vaccines.
Now, what concerns me is that you've cast doubt on some of these vaccines recently. I mean, like the last few years. But the data, and I can quote some of it, the data has been there for a long time.
So Cassidy really pleading there with Kennedy to say not that he's going to go in with no preconceived notions, but in fact to accept that the science is already established on this point. There was another topic that Republicans in particular were looking for assurances on from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and that was abortion. Of course, during his own presidential campaign, Kennedy expressed a belief that women should have more access to abortion than Trump and many Republicans believe they should have. And Kennedy did provide assurances to those Republicans in these hearings that he would implement whatever policies President Trump wants to put in place on abortion. But that also led to Democratic senators calling him out on his previous stances. Take a look.
Mr. Kennedy, I'm confused. You have clearly stated in the past that bodily autonomy is one of your core values. The question is, do you stand for that value or not? When was it that you decided to sell out the values you've had your whole life in order to be given power by President Trump?
Senator, I agree with President Trump that every abortion is a tragedy, that we can't be a moral authority in this country.
Right, but that isn't what you said back in New Hampshire.
Senator, I agree with President Trump that every abortion is a tragedy.
And finally, a major point really just stemmed around Kennedy's apparent grasp of the concepts and the agencies that he would be overseeing as health secretary. Several senators from both sides of the aisle quizzed him on differences between Medicare and Medicaid and asked him for specific policy ideas along those lines. And it seemed like many senators were left feeling like he didn't have enough of a grasp on those concepts. But really, a lot of eyes now are on Senator Bill Cassidy, because in addition to serving as the chair of the Health Committee, he also serves on the Senate Finance Committee. And that is the committee that's going to take the initial vote on whether to advance Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s nomination. We heard from Cassidy at the end of the health hearing that he was really struggling with how to vote because of the issues around vaccines. And he said that Kennedy might be hearing from him over the weekend.
All right, Meg Terrell, thank you so much. All right, for more now, we're joined by Lindsay McPherson, a congressional reporter at the Washington Times who attended RFK Jr.'s hearings. Lindsay, great to see you. Okay, as we just saw a sample of that, RFK Jr. grilled by Democrats and Republicans who tried to establish that he's not qualified, that he lacks basic knowledge of some distinctions, like the differences between Medicare and Medicaid, for example. Will all of that cripple his chances?
It is certainly holding him back at this moment. I think it's too soon to say it will cripple it. Certainly among Democrats, I think it's going to be hard for him to find any support among Democrats, particularly on the Finance Committee. Ron Wyden, who is the top Democrat on the Finance Committee, has already said that he doesn't expect any Democratic votes for him on that panel. So that does go back to the point where Bill Cassidy, a Republican on that panel and the chair of the Health Committee that had the other hearing, his vote is very important in terms of advancing him to the floor. And then on the floor, then there are several other Republicans to watch if he makes it that far, as well as some Democrats who may or may not vote for him, but it's more likely to be a party line vote.
Some of the sharpest attacks, as we saw, came from Republican Senator Bill Cassidy, the chair of the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. He's also a physician. The senator, has remained steadfastly loyal to Trump, but says he's struggling with, this nomination and, might have to have a conversation with Kennedy throughout the weekend. Do you think, Cassidy's loyalties to Trump will outweigh his, clear concerns that he has about RFK Jr.?
No, I don't think for Cassidy, Trump loyalty is a factor here really at all. He is up for re-election this year, so that is something to be considered. And the idea that if he were to oppose Trump, that, that would have some political ramifications potentially. But I think for him, it really is, as he made clear in those exchanges about the medical science and whether, and he made this clear in his closing argument at the last hearing, was that he wants to make sure that the megaphone that RFK already has as a public figure, somebody who ran for president, is well known, has a big following, but would have an even bigger following in this role if confirmed, that he's going to use that, and advance science that's been proven. And particularly, you saw the exchanges about autism. I think it was very frustrating for Senator Cassidy and others that he hasn't looked into these long-held studies and that he hasn't accepted the science and that he still needs to be shown data and he hasn't done the research. So is there an opening? Yes, I think he's provided an opening for him to come out more clearly about this. And I could see in the form of whether it's a public press conference, a letter, or something, that there might be something Kennedy would have to put out to get Cassidy's vote. And I think there's an opening for that, but he is definitely, I think, struggling with this because of his profession as a doctor and, the actual health ramifications.
Similar to all the other nominees, if 4 Republicans, vote against him, he's, not going to get through. If Cassidy, continues to sound very skeptical, we saw in the Pete Hegseth, nomination, it was Collins and Murkowski who were willing to, give a thumbs down. Who might be the another 3, Republicans who do not seem to favor RFK Jr. if Cassidy indeed is a thumbs down?
Well, certainly Collins or Murkowski are ones to watch here again. They were on the health committee and, their questioning was relatively light compared to Cassidy's in terms of, but they did both mention vaccines as an issue for them that they're watching and that they want assurances from him on. So I think that they are still key swing votes. And then, a senator who's been obviously quiet on a lot of these nominations is Mitch McConnell, the former Senate GOP leader. He actually had polio. And so the polio vaccine, was a big issue that Kennedy has affirmed his support for that. But I think he might have other questions too. And because he doesn't really talk to the press, we don't get as much insight into where he is. And he was kind of, that last surprise vote there with Hegseth. So we could see again where he maybe is a swing vote to watch as well.
All right. Lindsay McPherson, thank you so much.